Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 15th of May of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting updates, so let's start. And the most important and interesting updates are coming from Lugansk area currently. The Ukrainians for the fourth day in a row attacked this town, Lugansk, the capital of LPR, using these Storm Shadow missiles. And today they made another attack. And the Russians are saying that there were two missiles. The first one was the fake missile, and the Ukrainians were using that missile to discover and to spot the Russians' air defense systems, and the second missile was the real. And as a result of those attacks, the Russians lost another military building. For now, we still haven't received any updates about the losses from the Russian side. And later during the day, there was a terrorist attack from the Ukrainian side. There was an explosion, and there were two explosions in this city. And the Russian sources are saying that as a result of one of those explosions, the head of police forces of Lugansk was killed. So as you can see, the Ukrainians currently are very tightly focused on this town. To tell the truth, I don't understand the reasons of those attacks. When talking about missiles, yes, obviously the Ukrainians are trying to, let's say, to capture the Russian accumulation of forces and so on. But when killing the military, when doing these terrorist attacks, I'm not sure, because the front line are very far, and I don't think that there is a need to make panic among civilians or something like this. But probably the Ukrainians have other plans, because we know that there are some activation on the Kupiansk-Liman front lines, which we will discuss a little bit later. Now let's talk about Bakhmut. Today we got a lot of very interesting updates from this town. The Ukrainians continue their counter-offensive operation, and if we take a look at the Russian sources map, we're gonna see that this map has been updated, and the Russians, as a result of fierce fightings in the south of Krasny, by the way, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation included the information about these fightings in their daily update. The Russians were saying that the 4th Motorized Brigade took part in defense of the south of Krasny, of the north of Klishevka fortification, but as we understand from the sources, from the open source, that brigade was forced to step back together with the 72nd Mechanized Brigade in direction of Klishevka. And currently, let's say, these two brigades are trying to prepare and to establish their defense line along Klishevka fortifications. So currently the 72nd and the 4th Brigade are trying to secure Wagners from the south, exactly on the line from Bakhmut to Kurdyumovka, and this vital question for the Russians not to allow the Ukrainians to penetrate, and not just because of Wagner's progress of the Wagners in Bakhmut and the necessity of securing the flanks. Of course, this is the question of reputation. So currently you need to understand that there are two important persons in the Russian military authorities. The first one is Shoigu, the head of Minister of Defense, and the second one is Wagner, Prigozhin, my bad. And when talking, of course, about Shoigu, we are talking about at least two persons: Gerasimov, the head of Russian army and the special operation, and Shoigu, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. And this is the main battle, the battle of Bakhmut. And of course, we understand that neither Gerasimov nor Shoigu can allow the Russian forces to step back and to be defeated on the south. And maybe and probably this is the thing that Ukrainians are trying to do. Currently the situation, and maybe the Ukrainians understand that they will be forced to step back from this area, they will be forced to leave, and some sources are saying that these attempts to attack from the south of Ivanovsk and to the north of to the east from Bogdanovka is just attempts to maintain the corridor, to maintain the bridgehead, and to allow the rest of the Ukrainian forces to step back from the western part of Bakhmut. But now we see that probably the Ukrainians have another target, another aim of this operation is to force these very important persons of the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, Prigozhin, to have fightings between themselves. And the only possible solution to do this is to penetrate the southern flank and to force the Russian forces of the 72nd and the 4th Motorized Brigade to step back from this area. One more time, the Russian sources map has been updated, so as we understand, currently the Ukrainians controls this bridgehead on the southwest of Ivanovska, and of course we understand that currently the Ukrainians controls this passage, and now they can send armored vehicles, tanks to support the Ukrainians' offensive operation from the edge of the forest in direction of Klishchiivka. But from the other side, we understand that Klishchiivka fortification is located on the hill, and it won't be very easy job for the Ukrainians to, let's say, to penetrate and to destroy those fortifications. But anyway, we know that Ukrainians are not counting their losses, and if they have possibilities to attack, they will do this. And I expect that the next days we are going to see more fierce fightings and other attempts of storming these positions from the Ukrainian side. I'll remind you one more time that Ukrainians are using their 5th Storm Brigade as ex-Azov battalion, and of course the 80th Air Mobile Brigade that are located in this area. When talking about north, there are no changes. The Ukrainians were making few attempts to complete their penetration to force the Russians to step back, but you remember that a few days ago the Minister of Defense provided more updates about the numbers, so the losses were very heavy, and as I understand, the Ukrainians took a decision to regroup their forces in this area. The Ukrainian sources are saying that recently the Syrsky, the head of defense operation of Bakhmut, visited Konstantinovka, and he brought the second plan, the second part of the offensive plan in direction of Bakhmut, and probably we need to expect more waves of attacks from the Ukrainian side in direction of Bakhmut. But when talking about Bakhmut itself, the Wagners continue advancing. They have almost completed the clearing of the Nest fortification. There are not much buildings left in this area. Furthermore, the Russians continue advancing in the Constructor fortification, and to tell the truth, if we take a look at the Russian source map today, they have published videos of destroyed and buildings, of attacks against the buildings in Domino fortification. Domino fortification is the final fortification, and the title of this fortification was prepared because of some reasons. It's like, we can say it's like a domino. If one part of this domino falls, the entire system could collapse. So this is the reason of the title of this fortification, and we understand the value of this fortification. So the Russians continue pushing along Piramohi Street, along Talbuhino Street. The Russians continue advancing in Constructor fortification. They continue attacking along Livanevskoye Street. The Russians are pushing in from Cinema to the west part, and soon we expect within the next few days the final clashes for Domino fortification. And today we received a very interesting update about Bakhmut. As you can see, the Ukrainians stopped destroying the buildings, and this is very important because the Ukrainians at first had a plan while retreating to destroy the buildings, but they stopped doing this, and the question is why the Ukrainians did stop destroy buildings. And there are a lot of versions, and if you ask me, I'll give you my opinion. The Ukrainians don't have possibilities, and they don't have enough of explosions inside of Bakhmut, and the simple explanation is currently because of concentrating of the Ukrainian forces. It is too dangerous to keep so many explosions at the same place where the Ukrainian forces are over concentrated. But from the other side, the Wagners took a decision not to destroy buildings from their side. If you remember, during the first attempt, the Ukrainians were at least destroyed this building that located in the Nest fortification. This one, if you remember, like a week ago or something like this. Also those days the Ukrainians destroyed this fortification in this area, but after that they're stopped. And as one more time, they don't have enough of explosions, and the Wagners first thought that the Ukrainians did have a lot of explosions, so that's why they took a decision to destroy this area using guided bombs, using artillery. They were ruining buildings, and then they were pushing further. But as I understand, after capturing the first buildings in the citadel, they found out that there are no more explosions in the basements, so that's why they understood, they figure out, they make some kind of conclusions, and they now understand that the Ukrainians don't have possibilities to destroy every single building. And now the Russians understand that currently they need these buildings in domino fortifications, because from this perspective, from upcoming further Russian plans to attack Ivanovsk and to attack, let's say, Chasov Yar, they need this bridgehead, they need these big buildings, and they need them to control the Ukrainians in this area, to establish fire control, visible control, and any type of control. They can do this. So they changed their mind, and currently they're trying to keep and to save every single building because they understand the value of them. Furthermore, they understand that sooner or later they will be forced and will have to return control over this forest, over like the edge of Stupuchki and Chasov Yar, and they will be forced to step back, to return these positions. And without those high buildings in the western part of Bakhmut, it would be much more difficult. So this is the current situation in Bakhmut. This evening Prigozhin gave us another report, and according to his words, there are just 1.59 bloody long square kilometers of Bakhmut left to capture the entire town. Not much. This is not much. And now let's move to the north, and there are a lot of updates are coming from Kupin's front line. For example, when talking about the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation report, we mentioned that recently the level of losses from the Ukrainian side particularly on this front line, has been significantly increased, and the Russians, whereas, for example, today they were saying that as a result of fierce fightings, the Ukrainians lost another 145 soldiers. Yesterday, the losses were on the level of 100 soldiers. The day before yesterday, 170. And we were saying that something was going on there, and we were waiting for some updates, some piece of news from this area, and today we received them. The Russians were attacking in direction of Gryanikovka, and the Russians were attacking in direction of Masyutovka, this small village that located on the north of Первый Liman, this small village. But this is not the first update during this special military operation when the Russians reported about the capturing of this village. But the main problem of this particular about this village is that this village located is in the lowland, and the Ukrainians' main positions were located along the Skol River on this, and this is the high level. This is a hill, and using just a regular artillery like anti-tank systems, they were attacking the Russians from their bank of the river, the Russian bank of the river. It was very difficult for the Russians, not just even to capture. There is no problem to capture this small village. There was a problem to hold this area for a long time, to prepare trenches, fortifications, and so on. So the story was as follows. The Ukrainians took a decision to this is not for the first time, and when talking about this front line, the Russians are saying that Ukrainians are sending their commandos regularly on the regular basis. And there was another attempt, or these days, tomorrow or yesterday and the day before yesterday, the Ukrainians sent another commandos in the vicinity of Dvorechne that were discovered, spotted, and destroyed. Meanwhile, the Russians took a decision. Somehow, it's like, I believe it's probably the nice work of Russian intelligence. Somehow the Russian intelligence discovered that that position of Ukrainians in this area are weak. Maybe there was some kind of rotation process. We remember updates about the breaking of this process from the Russian side and so on. And somehow the Russians sent their commandos in this bank of the river, and those commandos managed to capture those artillery positions and to push the Ukrainians back from this area. And they captured, and they managed to hold this area for a very long time, and that time was enough for the Russian forces to establish their bridgehead in Masyukovka, to capture this area, to prepare fortification, and to establish final control over this area. But the thing is that the Russians still controls let's say, western part of Oskol River. There were no updates or any information whether the Russians were able to capture this forest on the west part of Oskol. If they were able to do this, then the situation of the Ukrainians in Dvorechna became worse and very bad, because as you can see, this is R79 road, is the only road, not the only road with a very normal quality that connects Kupinsk and Dvorechna, this town, and the Ukrainians were using this road to make rotation, supply and support, and probably and currently this road is under complete fire control from the Russian side. The Russian sources are saying that Ukrainian forces were raised because they were shocked. Currently they are doing some kind of regrouping in this area because they understand that they need return control over this bridgehead. We'll see whether they're able to do this or not within the next 48 hours, but this is very important to do this within the next 48 hours because the climate in this area has changed, and currently the Russians are able to build pontoon bridges, and I believe that in the next 24 hours they will, if they have captured the forest, they will be able to bring tanks to establish normal supply and support, and after that probably we can say that we are the witnesses of beginning of, let's say, encirclement operation of Dvorechna. We'll see whether the Russians are able to do this, or that was just the operation to establish bridgehead in Mosykovka, and after that the Russians will continue developing and advancing in direction of Kupinsk, but on their eastern part of or eastern bank of Oskol River. One more time, the Ministry of Defense reported that as a result of fierce fightings and advances of 138 Brigade, because all those advances was developed and managed by 138 Brigade, motorized brigade, the Russians managed to reduce the Ukrainian forces for 145 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles and 3 artillery systems. The Ukrainians haven't provided any information about the loss of the Russians on this front line, so we will skip this part. When talking about Liman front line, the Russians are saying that there were also a lot of activities from their forces. As you can see, the Russian source map are not showing any updates in this area, but we can say that the Russians managed to shut down one helicopter Mi-8, the Russians destroyed one radar, INTPQ-37, the Russians managed to coordinate and target the Russian artillery and their rockets, and there was explosions in Bilogorovka. Probably the Russians started preparation before offensive operation in this area. If you remember, a few weeks ago there was a lot of updates that the Russians captured first the industrial zone. There was the first updates about capturing the forest on the south. Later we got updates about some kind of encirclement in industrial zone where the Russians were appeared in operational encirclement, but after a few days or hours of fierce fightings the Russians were in black, and currently the Russians started bombing Bilogorovka. This is some kind of artillery preparation, and the Russians are saying that 76 air assault brigade of air assault division of the Russian force in this area fought heroically, and they were advancing, and all the respect according to the Ministry of Defense exactly for them. The Ukrainians haven't provided any information about any advances in this area, any loss from the Russian side, so we'll skip this part as well. Now we're moving to the south, and we're going to talk about Donetsk and South Donetsk area. The front line has been freezed and the vicinity of Avdiivka. After capturing of Krasnogorovka, Kamenka, we haven't received more updates from this area. Probably it's some kind of silent before the storm, we'll see. But when talking about Ugledar, the Ukrainians made a counter-offensive operation on the south, and that Ukrainians managed to develop their bridgehead up to 150 meters in direction of Nikolska, so probably that was a very successful attack from their side. The Russians were forced to step back. Later, some sources from the Russians reported that they managed to return a few positions, but we haven't received any numbers from both sides. The only update we received about the level of fierce fightings is just from the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, who reported that Ukrainians lost 150 soldiers. The Ukrainians are not providing any numbers, so we will skip this part as well. When talking about Kherson, no changes, just artillery duels and fierce fightings along Dnipro River. We stopped receiving any updates from the Ukrainian bank of the river about any attempts or any probes from the Ukrainian side to cross Dnipro River. Probably they have collected enough of data and information. Currently they're analyzing and trying to understand how they can improve their tactics in the battle for, let's say, here's for Dnipro River. Furthermore, the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation reported that during the previous 24 hours the Russians managed to shut down 7 HARM missiles, 1 Storm Shadow missile, 10 HIMARS missiles, and 21 drones. So as you can see, the Russians, according to the Russian sources, managed to shut down 1 Storm Shadow missile, and as we understand, 6 of them or 5 of them reached the target. But we don't know the losses, but I believe that there were losses, at least the buildings, at least the warehouses, at least some vehicles, and so on. And that's it for today. Military Summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in Ukraine. Thank you for your watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day. Bye bye.